That's okay.
What's going on between my ears? Everyone seems to be so clear, but I'm feeling foggy, my head's feeling slammed. Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Sam. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is the Judgement Seesaw.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Judgment Seesaw. I'm joined once again by a friend in the industry, a great person. Got Sam Schneider on here, also known as Buy and Sell You on X. Before we dive into you real quick, Sam, the show is the Judgment Seesaw. If anyone's watching for the first time, the name comes from economics. It's been parlayed by therapy, and it essentially represents a fun exercise that you can play with yourself. It's used to help people with social awareness, but the Judgment Seesaw basically illustrates that when you're talking or listening to someone, you're on two sides of a seesaw. You're either judging or understanding, and you cannot do both at the same time. So it's a fun exercise if you want to go try it sometime this week. Next time you hear somebody tell a story or during this show, like listen to Sam and I talk and try to judge us and understand us at the same time, and you'll find that it's pretty darn difficult, borderline impossible. But that is where the Judgment Seesaw comes from. It's about understanding, and I want to understand you and let you share your story and learn a little bit more about your thoughts on mental health, the industry, everything, and so forth. So let's go ahead and start with just a Sam plug. Like, what do you have going on right now? Tell everyone. I know we've got yards per, but what's your story with fantasy football? Who are you working with right now? And then we'll dive into mental health.
Right. Well, I started like so many people just as a player, and I'm a little older, so, or at least compared to some of the people that I talk to on X. So I started playing fantasy football let's just say we used notebooks to write down the stats. There wasn't even, Yahoo going or anything like that yet. So, my love for the game has been very deep, but I haven't really explored, addressing it as a part of me as a creator and as someone that can give advice on subjects and anything until I, kind of started getting around, and people kept saying, hey, you're pretty good at this. You know what I mean? And people that I would help would win things, and they'd be like, "What, can I give you money?" And I'm like, "What? Say what?
Yeah,
right. Do you want to do what now?" So when I and the other thing that I've always had a love for is writing, and when I started in the sports industry at all, it wasn't even fantasy related. It was I broke in with a very small website called The Scarecrow. It was fledgling.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then the owner bought half of Primetime Sports Talk, which is where I moved to after that. And there I really got my feet under me. I became an editor and, did a lot of work there, but there still really wasn't, my boss above me was like the main fantasy guy. And there really wasn't a whole lot of room for me to do that. So I still was doing a lot of just sports articles. So it wasn't until I left there that I kind of, ingrained myself into X and that community, which is so strong and so powerful, and everybody's so willing to help one another. From the biggest, from the heavy hitter down to the somebody that's just getting their start. Everybody treats everybody else very equally, and that's certainly welcoming.
Well, like you said, you've been around since the pen and paper. Get the scorecard from the newspaper days. Track on that. And then finally, recently, you decided to make the jump into the tech world with all of us millennials. And
right.
We're not as bad as everyone says, are we?
not nearly as bad. And everybody seems scared of Gen X people, but we're not too bad either.
Well, it's funny. And actually, just a side note, like the generational divides is often a great example of the lack of understanding people have with one another. And if you go back and you look throughout human history, in recorded history, at least in America, I've seen these articles where they break down the complaints from each generation, and they go back 25 years, and they're like back in the 1800s, and they're like, oh, this new generation's lazy. They don't do things the way we like, and it's just the same thing. It just recycles every time.
It really is, and it's going to keep being that way. For the longest time.
I'm gonna be an old man one day complaining about how the kids like never unplug from the wall. Like,
right, that's already me, and I'm saying it as I'm plugged into the wall.
Yeah, right. Irony is thick with that.
I'm like, get out and take a walk or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll complain about millennials on our cell phones. Like,
right.
Speaking of going away from that, though, it's a fun side note, but moving into like the mental health side of things, do you mind sharing? And you had said before, actually, we got on that this is something that you haven't got out and talked about. So I want to commend you and thank you. No pressure. Only share whatever you're comfortable sharing. But it would be wonderful to hear you give your thoughts on mental health and also share like whatever experiences you're willing to share with us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It really was all, like so many people, I was suffering from, a couple things, heavy anxiety and depression. And that led me to the bottle, really. Like so many kids, I experimented with pretty much everything, but then I really developed a reliance on alcohol. And it wasn't until I, woke up from a coma in the hospital one time that, I finally decided like I'm going down the wrong path with regards to alcohol. So I told myself that I would say yes to, it's kind of like that Jim Carrey movie. Is it Jim Carrey? Yes, Man.
Yes, man. Yeah.
I told myself that whatever anybody said to me at the hospital, I would just say, okay, I'll do it.
Nice.
And one of the things is they sent a social worker in that said, would you like to go see a counselor about your addiction? And I said, yeah. And I was like, I'll at least try it. I don't think anything will stick or anything like that. And I was very fortunate. The first day I walked in and I met my person, and she asked, all the typical questions of why do you think you do this and such like that and everything. And eventually she got to the root core, which was my anxiety and depression issues. And now what, started out as being an alcoholic in recovery solely, became really focusing on, what caused that, like what took me to that point. So that's been a very freeing thing. It's not as though I had something to blame it all on. But obviously you need to know the root of the issue in order to fix the issue. You can't just fix the stuff that's lying on top. And that goes for so many things in life.
Yeah. I love that. I had so many people on that have shared similar stories, varying levels of addiction, everyone like different substances, different strokes, different folks. For me, I went into therapy 6 years ago, was in dual diagnosis and like fought it. And only because like addiction can show up and you can be in various stages. I never, unlike you, like luckily have not been into a point where it got as bad as it did, and was mostly just, I think I caught it early and was like, okay, before this blows up, I'm already working on this mental health stuff. And all of my therapists are saying, hey, you've self-medicated a lot throughout your 20s, and you need to like keep an eye on that. You need to cut some things out of your life, like, and acknowledge it. And I fought that for a few years. And now I don't hardly ever drink. I don't do anything, but I have a different type of relationship to it. But anyway, I'm just rambling because that's my story.
No, not at all.
The point is with that though, like it is your experience where you went in, and typically people will just get thrown into like an AA program, and there are really, really good lessons to take from that. And it works for a lot of people. But the dual diagnosis side, and like you said, like looking at the root of why you develop these habits is how you really are able to then crack like the therapy code from it. If you follow a 12-step program, there's also stuff in that can help deal with it too. But I've always found when I talk to people that when you're in recovery, if you're doing both, like you're working on yourself through therapy, and then you have some sort of program and some person that you can rely on to keep your ship steered straight. Those are typically the success cases.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm very, and like you said, different strokes for different folks. I'm very anti-group. I can't stand groups. So AA was never for me. I didn't need NA, but it was posed to me that maybe an NA meeting would help, even though it was alcohol that was really causing the root of my issues. But I find that's really great for recovery, but I wasn't, delving into what's going on between my ears. You know what I mean? And it's also very triggering because it's just a lot of people, talking about bad stuff that they've done, and they're not proud of it. So they're not glorifying it or anything like that. But anytime I went to a meeting, I'd want to go out and drink afterwards. Which is kind of the opposite effect that you want it to have. So that, that one-on-one that I started having with my therapist was invaluable. And I'm still working through, a lot of problems. And I only started this in August. I started therapy, but I embraced it fully. And the aforementioned coma, I was found on the floor the day of a Scott Fishbowl draft, and missed the draft because of it, and was so ashamed of myself. And I was like, I'm never getting back into the Scott Fishbowl.
No.
And ironically enough, I'm wearing the shirt from the draft that I didn't show up to. But yeah, so I recognized that was going to, that I wasn't doing myself any favors with the drinking. It was good for pushing things aside. But then you just wake up worse for it the next day. And that's not a place you want to be. And that's not a place where you can address whatever the underlying issues are.
So one thing too that I don't want anyone that's watching, especially if you're someone that's struggling with any sort of substance dependency, is what I like to call it. I have nothing against AA or NA groups. It doesn't sound like you do either. Like you said earlier, different strokes for different folks. If you go talk to 100%. Dave Kluge has we can go back, if you're watching, go after this, go watch his episode. A lot of it's about this. And he has his own therapeutic methods that he has found that have worked for him. It's just different strokes for different folks. You have to find what you are willing to work with in order to change. If you are put in a situation where everyone says, you have a problem, you need to do this, and unless you do this, it's not going to work out, and you just kind of go through the motions, it's not going to change anything.
Right, of course. I mean, you have to find something that you fully believe in, that you're willing to invest in. And that's where it all comes from. If groups work for you, groups are great. Especially from the camaraderie aspect alone, works wonders for a lot of people. Just to find other like-minded people like them going through the same types of things. It just wasn't for me. And
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And I think this is one of those situations where it's throwing a lot of things against the wall and waiting for the one that sticks. And when that one sticks, then you stick to it.
Yes. I love that. That should be put on a wall somewhere in a therapy clinic. Like, just keep trying it out until you find the thing you like, and when it does, stick to it. Moving one last note. I know you mentioned like the point of this is to tie it into fantasy sports. You mentioned that for you, I hold on, let me organize my thought. For you, you had a moment where you realized you had to change things, and ironically, it overlapped with like a massive fantasy football tournament in Scott Fishbowl.
Mm-hmm.
I have been told since I was a kid that people don't change until the pain gets bad enough. And I think that is probably one of the truest catchphrases that I've heard in my life. It continues to be evident everywhere I look. Mm-hmm. For you, it can't just be the Scott Fishbowl, but in general, without going into personal specifics, like, what do you think in the end was the thought that you had where you decided, I have to change this? Was it just like the situation of like a result of circumstance where you just looked around and said, hey, this has got to change? Or was there something else building
I
towards?
mean, it took the hospital visit for me. Like I was aware that it was a problem, but I wasn't willing to do anything about it. So that, and I always told myself that I was not scared of however it was going to end. I was not concerned about it. Then when you wake up in the hospital, you have a little different viewpoint.
Sure.
So, that's kind of when I said, yeah, I need to do something or else nothing's going to change for me. Luckily, I have a family that's put up with my shenanigans for far too long. But we're also,
I can relate.
Yeah, but we're also willing to, fully support me in the endeavor, and a wonderful girlfriend who does the same. So in that respect, I've been far luckier than I had been prior, because prior to that, I really didn't have much of anybody. I just had a lot of people that I saw once in a while, and you see those commercials. There's one out right now, but the life of the party is usually the one that's got the most issues. Not usually. I don't want to make a harsh generalization there, but that was me. I had a switch that I could flip when I went out, and it wasn't a party till Sam got there. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and then I went home tired and exhausted and couldn't leave the house for 4 days afterwards. I spent everything I had, and then had to really recharge for a long time. And I didn't recognize that as a problem for a good long while. So I don't try to be like that, even though when I quit drinking, I was terrified that I'd be boring, that people wouldn't want to hang out with me anymore. And even when people said, no, that's absurd, I was like, I don't believe you.
Sure.
And it turns out they were right.
Yes.
They do still want to hang out with me. So, but that's what the fear of depression does to you. And that's what and this whole story is what the fear of anxiety does for you. You got a million things going on. You want to numb it, and then you feel like $1,000,000. And then, like I said earlier, then you don't grow from that.
Yes. Yeah. You're just storing whatever you were dealing with for another day. And
Right.
as you store it, it builds and builds. It gets more insidious and ingrained into like you physiologically, even until eventually one day you have to deal with it, or you have a blow up and you put yourself, whether subconsciously or consciously, you find yourself in a position where you're like, all right, well, I've forced myself to a point of breaking and I have to change this.
Yeah. Let's shove it down until it blows up on our face.
Yeah.
That seems like a great idea. Right?
Well, and it's not even unique to like addiction and like that umbrella. It is very, very much I'm going to talk a little out of pocket here.
Please do.
But my understanding I work at a school, and just from the people I've talked to and I've read, is that the current generation, even with like the rise of social media and the instant gratification with everything, it has given people the inability to confront and deal with problems, and instead shift their focus and just distract. It's not necessarily drinking, but it is kind of the same thing. It's just on a more micro, repetitive scale.
I agree completely, because I even in recovery from alcoholism, there's still a lot of work I need to do on my anxiety. So I still catch myself doing old habits. Maybe it doesn't involve substances anymore. But am I lazy for too long? Yeah. Do I have a hard time getting motivated? Sure. And that can be maddening for other people, and it's maddening for me too.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But there's a guilt to that, but it's not shame. Shame and guilt are two different things, and I think people get those mixed up. Shame is regretfulness. Guilt is, knowing you shouldn't do something. And, one does not have to lead to another. You can always change the aspect of what you're doing in order to make sure you don't reach the other point.
Yeah. It's well, and I think too that like you talked a little bit, and let's move into like the anxiety and depression side of things, because they're in the end, as you were working through it now, you had substances, you were putting them in between you and the depression and anxiety. Now the substances are not there between you and the anxiety, so you're having to confront it. And as you mentioned, like when you kind of, for lack of a better term, cold turkey yourself to expose yourself to a bad habit and just let it. Now there's no barrier between you and what you were trying to avoid. It's really, really difficult, and it like anxiety through the roof. I like it makes everything kind of heightened when you first start, but over time, my experience with it, I did 500 days of sobriety in my mid-20s, and that was part of when I realized I wasn't like a full-blown addict. I was like, I've just decided to do this. I did it for 500 days, and I'm not like I'm good. So I caught it early enough, like I mentioned earlier. But I found like the first 3 to 6 weeks sucked, dude. Like just it wasn't like I relapse styles. I just didn't know what to do with my time. I didn't know how to sit there and process things. I had lost that skill, and I was just squirrely and anxious and unable to sleep. But then like 2 months into it, 3 months into it, 4 months, all of a sudden my life just got better. And I was at peace, and I was executing at work better than I ever had before, and was able to find a semblance of what I felt like normalcy in the way I approached life. How has that been for you so far? Have you entered that stage of recovery yet? Or are you still working through it?
Yeah, I think I have, and I had the same sort of issues where, for the first while it sucked. I mean, it still kind of sucks from time to time now, but less so often. One of the best pieces of advice that my therapist ever gave me was, you need to do something. You need to find, whether it's a hobby, whether it's work, whether it's just going out and doing the same thing repetitively at the same time every week, whatever it is. And that's kind of where fantasy football came in for me. That's one of the things that made me decide to become a content creator. She kept saying, well, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? And I was like, I don't have any. My hobbies were drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw this opportunity of something that I was genuinely interested in pursuing, and man, I just like full bore, you know what I mean? Like head down, eyes forward. And, also when you stop any substance, you tend to get more creative,
Yes.
Which is, welcome to have that come back, because I had lost all my creativity whatsoever. And so when I entered into this world and this community and saw what some other people were doing, it prompted me to try to find my own niche. And I'm not sure I've found it yet. I have some ideas that, I think are good. But it's just nice to welcome that creativity back into my life, whether I've put it all to practice so far or not. I know that I'm on the right track.
Yeah. Well, and I am a pathological creative person. It's like my only thing that I feel like I was blessed with in life, truly, from day one, was just the ability to be creative. And the idea of numbing that skill is honestly, for me, like that's the scariest thing I've heard anyone tell me on the show so far. It's just like losing the intuitive ability to just kind of like make new things. And so, but you're not the only person I've heard that from. I remember hearing about that when I was going through AA meetings and talking with people, and it's back now though. You're exercising things. And as you said, like you're doing a good job of not beating yourself up, but also recognizing the path you're on. And like,
right.
I'm not the lead of a massive channel yet. I don't have a giant 40,000 person following. I'm not massive, but I'm working towards finding out what will eventually potentially take me there. And I'm finding happiness in my current state.
Well, and that's the gist of it. At the end of the day, it's, are you happy doing what you're doing? Do you feel rewarded, at least in yourself, whether it's recognized by other people or not, or valued by some, but not valued by others? You can't please everybody. But the important part is number one. You have to please number one. And I think that's genuinely what I've been working towards most of all. I grew up as a child actor, and I acted all the way through till, I don't know, probably till I was about 30 years old, or close to it, and did a lot of work. And when I lost that creativity, it was like a part of me just died. It was just left behind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To the point where I was like, I don't even think I can go back there. So I had to find other outlets in order to find that creativity again. Let it work for me in the idea that it makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, and that is in the face of the demons that you were overcoming, which in the end came from unhappiness. And so it's perfect. I've talked about on some of the other shows, like the concept of ikigai, which is a Japanese philosophy, and it's just finding happiness in your vocation, right? And for you, it seems like you're on that path for the most part. You're doing it right now, and but like mental health wise, just curious, how are you finding the ability to like balance your happiness and mental health with the demands of not just like whatever writing gigs you have going on, but therapy and everything else that you're responsible for in life?
That's a good question because it seems fluid. I'll find something that works, and then, a month later, I'll think that it's not working so well anymore, and I need to find something else. So I guess I'm just kind of riding the wave in that respect.
Interesting. Yeah.
With you, just as long as you know that the object is to get to the shore, you can take whichever wave you need to get there.
That's beautiful.
So, I think that's really important. If one thing isn't working for you anymore, you can shift, you can pivot, and find something else that'll get you closer and closer and closer. And it might not seem like that shore is getting closer, but you might find a wave that you're like, wow, I think I can ride this one for a while. And that's really big. I think the importance is not to become complacent. Otherwise you're just left out at sea.
Right. And as you mentioned too, like your therapist told you, you got to find something to do. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, especially in recovery. And one thing that, let me put my thought together real quick. One thing I was thinking about as you were talking, like you ride it sort of fluidity. That's not the right word. You find something that you like, you latch onto it to keep yourself happy, and you feel like it's improving you. And then over time, maybe you get a little bored with it, but it sounds like you pay a lot of attention to that side of your brain, the kind of, I'm bored, maybe I can go do some old things. I don't have anything to do. I don't want to go do this. These other old habits are there. They seem kind of nice. Like keeping that at bay, that dark ditch is like really, really important. I don't remember what my question was. I just am like rambling.
Well, to be clear, when I say that, maybe one thing's not working as well anymore, I don't completely leave that behind.
Sure.
It's almost like something that I've learned that has benefited me, and to hold on to it. I'm not just, my attention isn't just like, okay, dump that onto this. I don't do that. I try to keep as many good things in there that locks out the bad things. So, that's really important. And, this is kind of switching subjects here, but, I mentioned this is one of the first times I've spoken publicly about it, but I do feel very strongly about it. And the first time that I was keen to the idea of involving myself was actually Movember. Because I had no idea. I had never really done any research into it or anything. And I had no idea that mental health and suicide prevention and things like that were such a big part of that. I was asked by another guy on Twitter if I wanted to join his team for Movember. And I was like, what do I need to do? He's like, well, you kind of got to put yourself out there and then, set a goal and walk every day. And I was like, oh, my therapist will love that. Like, if I'm like, well, I got to walk this many miles by the end of November.
Yeah.
And sure enough, she's like, well, good for you.
Yeah,
I'm like, look at me.
I get it. Look at me.
Right. I win. So yeah, there's and that of course is, and I'll bleed this into another subject. Men's mental health is very, very important to me. I don't think it's discussed enough. Somewhere along the line in history, it became pretty much acceptable for any woman anywhere to be seeking help through therapy. And that's completely acceptable. And it's also a very good thing. And it's a shame that there are so many men out there that still are blocking themselves from, maybe recognizing that there might be an issue that they could address, because I would recommend therapy to anybody, both sexes and all ages. It's so beneficial to have somebody that, at least at the beginning, that you don't know from Adam, to just talk to, and who's actually trained in helping you unlock the things that you can't quite figure out. You can be the smartest person in the world and still decide that that's not an issue right there. And then they're like, no, let's talk about that thing back there.
Does your therapist do the really annoying but very effective why do you feel that way, or why do you think that?
Of course.
Like, oh, it's the worst. My therapist 2 weeks ago, literally like for 5 minutes, I was sharing something, trying to work through trauma from my childhood, said something about my outlook on things. Why do you feel that way? Why do you think that? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, but really, like, why do you think that? And he went and he just hammered me for like 6 minutes until eventually I didn't have any more walls up. And I was like, it's because I don't have confidence in me right now. And I don't know where that's from. And I wasn't willing to admit it. Having a therapist that knows what they're doing, like you said, is really, really helpful.
Well, and mine also gives me the whole, she'll ask me, why do you think they said that to you? And then I start thinking about it. I'm like, oh,
she's getting you to practice the Judgement Seesaw.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, she knows that I've caught on to some of her things, but she still manages to ask me why I thought something in a different way. And I'm like halfway through, I'm like, oh, you got me again. But I really lucked out with mine. When I agreed to do that in the hospital, I called and answered all the questions, and they said, we've got males and females. What would you prefer? Well, to be honest, I didn't think it was going to last very long, so I was like, I don't care. And now, I went on vacation for 6 weeks and couldn't talk to my therapist, and I was like, I mean, it's not like I suffered from it, but it just was a chunk of my life that was missing, and short of talking to myself about it because I was alone. There wasn't anybody else to bounce the questions or bounce the problems off of. But she's very good at making me answer my own questions, and I ask her plenty of them, and she'll baby step me through to the answer. But I still feel accomplished at the end of the day because I kind of did figure it out on my own, even if it took some prompting.
Yes. Well, in the end, recovery and mental health, no matter how many people you got around you, people telling you this, listening to that, in the end, like you said at the beginning of the show, you got to want it. You got to believe in it, and you got to want to change. And until that happens, you might make progress, but you're going to rubber band back to the old habits. You really have to actually, on a fundamental level, be willing and eager to make changes about yourself. And I applaud you for like it sounds like you've been successful with it so far. It has its ups and downs. There's always risk with going back to old habits, and that will never go away. And it's just important to continue like pushing forward and putting distance between yourself and the way you used to be. Whether it is, I'm not talking about just Sam, but like anyone trying to change yourself, work through something in mental health. It could be anger management. It could just be depression. I don't want to feel that way anymore. I don't like that guy. He was sad.
Right.
Change.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, number one, there are so many tools out there to use. It's almost a crime not to use them. You might as well use them. They're there for you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt. But I've always been a very results oriented person. I like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is one of the first times where I've recognized I don't need to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Just the feeling of making progress is enough for me.
That's fantastic. Like it's sometimes as you go through therapy, you learn to love the little things that you used to ignore. I think that this is like a really complicated road. We all like life is complicated. It goes up and down, it twists and turns, it left and right. And if you're just chugging along and blinking a little bit and missing things and not paying attention to like the basics, you'll lose the love for like the little stuff that makes life worth it. And
there's no such thing as too late.
And there exactly. Side note, I am a self-prescribed superhuman rationalizer. I can rationalize whatever the fuck you want me to rationalize. And when I was in therapy, I learned from all of my friends that I met that is the trait of people who have addictive personalities, is they are just like superhuman rationalizers. If you and I could find a way to create a career where the job description was just rationalizing stuff for people, we'd all be rich.
I'd be rich tomorrow.
Well, that answers my question. I was going to ask you if you found that to be true, and if that is like a skill that you've had to subdue in the way that I had to.
100%. And I think hand in hand with that is, and this is a negative, is that I am the king of do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can give you all the tools, all the advice, recognize your situation from the outside, give you really unbelievable advice, but I can't give it to myself.
Yeah.
I won't listen to me. So I need like another me to tell me what to do sometimes.
Well, and I think that goes back to, I'm being a bit of a therapist here, so this is probably wrong. I'm not a therapist, but my hunch is it goes back to depression and anxiety. And those two things often are a reflection of like self-confidence and self-worth. And for me, I struggle with the same thing where I don't really I give such good advice to other people. Even this AI stuff that I'm planning on doing next month, I've been telling everyone how to use it and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But I've only for a lot of it, I've only just play tested it and then I've moved on. I've been unwilling to listen to my own advice and force myself to go back through the playbook I've given people and do it myself. And that's same with every aspect of my life. So I really do relate with you on that. It's a struggle, and I don't think it's unique. You're depressed, you have anxiety, you're an addict, whatever the umbrella that you live under, you have some other mental health challenge that you're working through. Probably going to come with a little bit of self-doubt, unless you are manic bipolar and you think you're Jesus, which in that case, go deal with that.
Oh, you didn't know you were on with Christ right now?
I did not think so, but if I did, thank you for joining me. Yeah. We're going to offend somebody. We can't make these jokes.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. My comedy knows no bounds.
No. Well, and this show, I've been vaping on it, talking about addiction. I would never do this on a regular show, but mental health shows, you haven't cursed a lot. We've had people an episode 2 weeks ago. Brendan,
I haven't?
I got on. No, you haven't.
I usually don't even notice because I'm a sailor.
My point was that these are increasingly more just casual as the month goes on. You're my, I think, 22nd interview in a row, and this has been super, super fun to sit and listen through. Your story is pretty earnest, and your ability to, you said you hadn't done this before, but man, you seem pretty comfortable and are very natural at just talking about what you've learned, what you've been through, sharing how it can help other people. So let's do one or two more, and then just for the sake of time and sleep, we'll wrap it up. But what advice would you give someone that is in the fantasy community right now that is trying to make their mark but is struggling with confidence or maybe even depression and anxiety?
Well, I think most of the people, even some of the people that you might follow on X, for instance, that you consider to be, really, really, like, they've made it. You know what I mean? Like, they know exactly what they're talking about. Almost everybody in this industry has that moment of feeling like a fraud, at least when they start. And that's the first, in my opinion, or at least for me, that was one of the first hurdles I had to get over, was thinking that I was just stealing from everybody else's playbook.
You're not.
And then I realized that the playbook is really the same for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just how you decide to use it and which plays you call at which times. So, I think the important thing is to put yourself out there, be honest, and to be willing to talk openly to people that you think you can't talk to. You'd be surprised who's willing to, chat you up or offer you career direction or advice. Or, when I first started writing, here are a couple of the websites I know that'll give you an outlet. You'll get that advice. All you have to do is be genuine and ask for it. When I started that series, I was talking about, I started writing this series for Yards Per Fantasy, where I would profile a player during the off season. I started it right after the Super Bowl, and I would, instead of just saying, "Here's my opinion," actually, so many people in this industry don't even say, "Here's my opinion." They just say, "This is the truth."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which, if it works for them, that's fine. And mine was very, here's my opinion. And it was very well thought out and, whatever. And then what I did was I addressed 5 people who I respected in the industry for each article I did. I used 5 different ones for almost every article, except for Dave Heilman did several, Mike Cash did several. And I would have them put their opinion down and, just write me, a lengthy paragraph about that particular player. If they agreed with me, okay. If they disagreed with me, okay. Well, that gives the reader, so many more options. But more importantly, and to your question, is that I was petrified to ask some of these guys who I hadn't even spoken to before, to lend their time and effort to this, even though it's something I knew they could bang out in like 15 minutes. Some people are very, very busy. And sure, there were a couple people that said no, but almost to a man, everybody would say, "Look, if I have time, sure, I'll do it." And the response was overwhelming, and it helped me build some relationships that I remain very proud of now to this day. So I guess looping it back all around is just don't be afraid to put yourself out there and talk to other people in the industry. There's no reason to go out alone. You know what I mean? When you've got I think one of the strongest communities on X will have your back and help you in anything you need help with.
I love that. It's the collaboration approach and like showing humility, especially as a newer person, like being like, "Hey, these are my thoughts. I would love your help with this. Can you give me your opinion?" is a really, really smart strategy. It's evident. It's not. I haven't seen a lot of articles where people are doing that. So I'm not saying that you didn't have an original idea, but it is evident throughout the mock draft side of the industry. That is something where it shows up all the time.
Yeah.
Hey,
And I did a couple of those this offseason. Yeah. where I contributed to someone else's.
Yes. And so like the collaboration side of the industry really does help the community stay tethered together, and it's really important. I don't, different strokes for different folks. Do your content your own way, but I do value the people that say like, hey, this is just my opinion. I am open to argument. If anyone thinks that I'm wrong, let me know. Let's have a discussion. I'll change my opinion if I am. And I think that content is way more valuable, not just for the reader, but for like the community. That said, you can create a pretty big following by being very direct. And
for sure. I mean, if you're confident in your approach and and you've got all this stuff to back up that you kind of know what you're talking about, then that's okay. Being direct is completely okay. For someone like me, somebody's never seen my name before, they don't know who I am. But they might, look at the people that were in my article, like, Shay Manila and Mike Cash and Dave Hyman and be like, well, he knows some people. So,
yeah,
maybe he kind of knows what he's talking about. But it was also a learning experience for me because I was able to put my opinions down and then read some of what, the other guys had to say. And in one case, they changed my opinion about a player completely. And so, we're all here to learn just as much as we are to instruct.
I love that. I think that's something that gets lost sometimes as people like pursue their own brand and their own name, of which like you have to tap into your ego if you're going to do that. And then by doing so, you can lose sight of a little the humility that got you started. If we could all just go back and say, like, yes, you have to be humble, show some humility, and be open to collaboration and learning, because that's the point of the community. So I love that. Last question real quick, and then let's close this thing out.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Mike Cash, who, by the way, was on the show just 2 days ago.
I just saw that today. Yeah.
Dave Heilman, I think I'm going to have him on sometime in June. I'm going to continue this show like weekly, just in perpetuity, and then I'll let it take over my channel during the month of May. But who else? You've been coming up in the industry. You've recalibrated your life. You have just like persevered through some tough stuff, and it seems like you're doing really well. I feel blessed to have you on the show. Your vibe is fantastic.
Well, thank you. I feel blessed to be here.
Well, who would you tag? I know you mentioned Dave, Shane, Mike. Are there any other people in the industry that have been like instrumental in supporting you, or that you could shout out and say like, hey, you might not have realized it, but that one time?
Yeah. I mean, of course now names immediately are going to fail me, but, but
you're on the clock.
But Nick Scripp is also a really, really awesome one, who's always open to talk, and a lot of people that you've had on the show already. I've had a running dialogue with Chris, who you just had on about 4 or 5 days ago. I've had a running dialogue with him recently, because I watched one of his shows and I didn't know much about him before that. And so cool. Now I'm at the point where when I see somebody on something, Wendy Early is another one. When I
Shout
see
out
somebody,
Wendy Early, I love her.
Bob Harris is my bestie.
Yep.
Which when I found out that was like her tagline, I was so offended, because like I love Bob Harris. I was like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even guys like Dynasty Dad and those kind of folks that are always just willing. I feel really, really good when I go to my DMs and I see, all these people, Chuck Bass, and all these people who are just continuing a dialogue with me at all times. And it makes me just feel like I'm a part of the community, which I think is a giant first step, because it means I've got all these people that I know I can bounce ideas off of and, hopefully collaborate with in the future. With any ideas that come to me.
Well, I love that. And there are like we've got Polly's Playoff, the Scott Fish Bowl, the Baby Bowl. There's also like there's so many different tournaments now that get the community involved for good causes. I believe that this industry sometimes people might use the charity aspect for like traffic, but whatever. You know what? I don't care
As long as
because
the money's going to charity.
because exactly like you know what? It's a great strategy, but I don't like I know a lot of these people on a personal level, and that is not why they're doing it. And
Yeah.
it's just a cool another wrinkle to the industry that I think is really valuable and unique, where charity is kind of like the driving. If you want to have successful content and put something together that's new and fresh, you should tie it into charity. Side note for Ronnie Evans in 2025, you should tie this 30-day thing into a charity.
For sure. Seconded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I'm registered for Polly's Playoff, and as well as, so many of the, Battle of the Sexes and OCB and Orkney Bowl and or that is OCB and JTT Cup and all these. And I just finished drafting on some of my like 22 eliminators.
Oh my God. I can't do all that. It gives me too much anxiety.
It's funny because like charity season has now almost become more important to me than the actual like redraft season. Obviously, charity season, finding all of these causes, even if they draft early or whatever, that's so much fun to look at, further down the line and look at it in September and be like, what the heck was I doing back then? What was I thinking?
Yeah. Well, and it gets you into most of them come with drafting, and drafting is like, we could all probably admit the regular season's fun because I like watching football, but my favorite thing to do in fantasy is to draft. And
yeah, and you were right about the mine too. Mine too is easily my favorite thing is to draft, which is why I love all the best ball tournaments.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Orkney Bowl, and I'm in a division with the guys from Fantasy Sanctuary, who
nice.
I respect on such a monumental level. Those guys are just amazing, and I when I saw I was in that division, I was like, I gotta beat these guys.
Did you?
No, I'm sure I won't. It's this year.
Okay.
But just to rub elbows with those fellows, and then just to see the same names popping up in a bunch of these charity ones and be placed in the same division as so many people, that's really good. As well as through this whole Scott Fish Bowl process, there's Jason has a SFB hopefuls chat where everybody shares, contests and everything like that and cheers everybody on. It's the most positive chat I've ever been a part of. It's like 120 strong now. And I think 65% of the people have gotten in.
That's amazing.
Because they show up for every live stream. They watch every show. They do, all the due diligence. And to a man, if you asked them if it mattered, if they finally got in at the end, they'd say, this has been such a great experience that I don't even have to be in anymore. I've met so many great people throughout this group. It's just my little ounce of positivity throughout the day. That chat is unbelievable. And shout out to people. You can DM at Spides78. There's still time to join, as there are still some waves to go out.
Yeah,
and
Scott's like tripling up the pool this year. It's wild.
Yeah, and Ryan drops into our chat almost daily just to see how everybody's doing, and occasionally he gives away a ticket or something like that. And it's a great thing, and it just ties in so well with this charity season. People that join the chat, most of them just kind of make a little side donation to Fantasy Cares just for being in the chat. So I think just in that chat alone, we've raised like $2,000. So
amazing. Well, I love that. I mean, shout out to Scott Fishbowl and all of them, Fantasy Cares, everything they do.
absolutely.
I love them to death. I've buttered them up on like every show though. So enough of that.
Right. Yeah, their ears are probably burning like 25 times a day at this point.
Yeah, I'm joking. I could talk and support them and everything they do to ad nauseum forever.
Same.
Love them to death. So for you, any final thoughts before we close this out?
I don't think so. This has been really nice, and thanks for having me to. This is something that I've only spoken to about a very few people on a very personal level, most of which I was challenged by my therapist to do so. But this is one of the first times that I've been a little more public about it, and I couldn't be happier doing it. And you're certainly a gracious host.
Well, hey man, I appreciate you genuinely. It's the truth. Anyone that's willing to come out and share and help support the cause of mental health awareness is always a winner in my book. And there's something really, really powerful to learn, as you said earlier, like you talk about with your therapist. She gets you to ask, why did someone say this to you? What is going through their head? Can you try to understand what they have going on?
Right.
For me, this show has been an absolute godsend for feeling more connected to the fantasy space, but on like an even more personal level than I could have ever dreamed of. And so it's because of people like you. So thank you.
Yeah, and I've found that of your videos in this series this month that you've put out, there's no two people that say the exact same thing. So I would encourage anybody that's seeing this to go back and watch a couple other episodes and check them out again and see what different people's viewpoints, not unlike that article series I was talking about. Everybody's got a different viewpoint and everybody comes from a different place. And the more you can understand where different people can come from is, the more empowering you can be for yourself as well.
Love it. Well, selfishly then, on that note, hey, if you're watching and you're on Twitter right now, go to my profile, click on Good Guy AI. You can go on to YouTube, actually. Just type in Good Guy AI. Go to the channel. Give me a subscription. This is a brand new channel. A lot of AI stuff is coming later, but the purpose of this channel is to be there to help and care for others, especially in relation to AI, because there's a lot of it's very nebulous. But I think behind all of that, any problem that anyone has with anything or any difficulty, whether it's with tech or outside of tech or the industry, all of it kind of ties back to mental health. And so AI and mental health are the focus of what I'm doing in the fantasy industry. I'm trying my best to help prop up and make people like Sam feel more welcome and more open than they already are. I hope that anyone watching has enjoyed the series. We've got a lot of big names coming in next week, which I'm really excited about to close the week off. And the final thing I would say is just remember to love yourself and forgive yourself. And if you can do those two things, your life will improve. It's not selfish. You only got one life to live and you got one body to live it in. So remember that and take pride in it. Sam, appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Ronnie.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's throw on one more time.
What's going on between my ears? Everyone seems to be so clear, but I'm feeling foggy, my head's feeling slammed. Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Sam. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is the Judgment